Okay, we can take a look at the next slide, access control, but before we do, there is a slide that precedes this, kernel mode. Now go to this YouTube video and it has a very learned individual that goes into details about the kernel mode, and I do recommend everyone watch it. And let's take a look at access control. Now with this access control, let me get the drawing tool. We can actually put the, oh, you know what, the drawing tool is like, no, it wasn't working correctly there, but okay, so we can take the application layer and then we have everything that it goes on the bottom layer, such as the CPU, and I can just put in CPU just to abbreviate everything. And the thing that holds everything together, the layer that connects everything, is the kernel. So the kernel is going to connect to the application layer, and the kernel is also going to connect to the CPU layer. And this is all based on the drawing in this the kernel, CPU, memory, and devices. So the devices would be all the peripherals. So the way I want you to look at this slide is look at all these possible things that can go wrong, such as, John, which can utilize the wk. Wk is a text file. You can Google it. That's been going around for like the last 20 years. It has all the typical passwords. If you've ever seen the movie or the show The Office, Michael, the manager, his password, I think, was password 123, or it was like 12345. I recall that there was somebody that was a network manager, and of course Michael was afraid that he was some sort of a terrorist or something like that. Anyways, we recall that it was actually Michael that jeopardized the networking, or jeopardized everyone's network, because his password was easy to guess. I think it was, as I said, 12345. That being said, that would have been one of the passwords that was in the wk text. So this program called John actually references anything you ask it to, but it's generally going to be referencing a file, and Rocky was one of those files that was out there that had like literally every easy to guess password that was out there. Literally had thousands of entries, so John could actually utilize a brute force attack to get to this. The whole point of it is that you're trying to, invade one of those user owned processes to try to get to the kernel and ultimately get to the bottom layer, the peripherals, the CPU, and all the RAM and everything. Another way to do it is through social engineering, and then of course DNS spoofing and hijacking, and of course one of the remedies is to make sure that your account uses Dual to help protect it. Dual helps you define, it helps you define identity, to make sure that your identity is basically yours by two things: what you have and what you are. For example, you can have like an email that they email you a particular password to, or your cell phone that's been pre-assigned, and they can text you a password on your cell phone, and the Dual algorithm is something that adds another layer of protection to make sure that you weren't, for example, social engineered. Now let's take a look at, and let me get out of here. Let's take a look at the work groups and Active Directory. Well, work group is a series of independent PCs utilizing peer-to-peer. So, for example, in one LAN, meaning connected by a local switch, you can have a PC, laptop, printer, and a couple more PCs, as I said, on the same LAN. And this supports individually attached storage. An example of a good work group in Linux is Samba. And then, of course, with Windows, you can hook up work groups there. And the scalability is very low, only 10 to 20 devices. The whole point of a work group is you can have printers and PCs you can have printers and fax machines, and all a work group is there to do is to potentially share those the printer and file servers to other people. The other the other aspect is Active Directory, which is a type of domain controller. An Active Directory is actually a database that you can have granular control. So, for example, if you have a user here, I'll represent that with a box, and here you can have the user connected to the internet, and on the internet is maybe Facebook, and you can manipulate the packets going in and out of Facebook such that you can have granular control. So, for example, your firewall can be set up to maybe filter particular types of traffic, like low latency type traffic, in which it would block instant messages on Facebook and ads. So, in other words, the worker or I'm going to say client, can get on your company sponsored network. He can get to his Facebook so he can stay connected socially, but you're not going to allow him to engage in instant messaging, and you're going to be able to prevent the ads, because for the sole purpose, not necessarily of controlling behavior, but for the sole purpose of saving your company's bandwidth, because all of those instant messages, all those little ads eat up bandwidth. PCs in the Active Directory and, as I said, domain controllers, so I'll put DC here for domain controllers, they are controlled by the network administrator. So this would be the client-server type network. So the control is centralized. Now with work groups, it is not client server, it's peer-to-peer. So you have an individual, decision about whether or not you want to join in the group. Active Directory, everyone is naturally part of the group. And although you should be in the same LAN, the scalability of Active Directory is such that it can scale different autonomous systems, completely different IP addresses, and when you do that, that's called a federation. So the scalability of domain controllers and Active Directory is very high. Another interesting fact about Active Directory is the fact that anyone within the domain that the Active Directory is connected to, the administrator can log into anybody's computer when they are connected to Active Directory. So that is yet another plus. Let's look at the next slide, Windows attack surfaces and mitigation. So a better way to look at this is here. Where is the drawing tool? Right here, draw. And we have our asset right here, whatever it is, and maybe it has some IP. So we start from the inside out. The data that resides on it, it's a bunch of ones and zeros. We'll just say 101. That is going to be encrypted as it resides in this storage, and every piece of communication going in or out will also be encrypted. I'll just say ENC for encrypted. That makes doubly sure that even if anybody eavesdrops on this data with Wireshark, and they can because we did a prior lab, they're going to get a bunch of garbage. Now, to even have legit access to whatever this IP is, this intellectual property, it's going to have access control. So you're going to have usernames and passwords, and you're going to have authentication services or authentication servers outside of the chain of communication that is going to be doubly protected as well. And even above this, everything will be protected by a firewall. A firewall is a specialized appliance that applies little rules to ensure, and basically it will impose access control lists to ensure that if you belong here, you can join in, but if you don't belong here, then you cannot come in. And this occurs at the packet level, and this occurs inside the packet. So we're looking at quality of service issues. So if it won't necessarily be completely filtered, but it may be assigned a priority, such that if there's a tie with a packet with a lower priority, your packet will win. An example of this is voice over IP, VoIP, which stands for voice over IP. If you're a voice packet, because it requires such care, because it requires it has such high low latency requirements, that if the voice packet ties with like an FTP packet, file transfer protocol, the voice packet will for sure be processed first, because there is a low latency requirement for that protocol, such that if there's any minuscule interruption, then that call is pretty much useless because of the way voice packets go. That being said, that firewall is to protect you and everyone else in the system. All right, in terms of actually installing the Windows Server maintenance, and actually I'm going to put a line through here simply because it doesn't have to be just Windows. It could be really any server, because this is a system admin class. As system admins, you're going to be dealing with different servers, different types of servers, and the idea is you install the operating system or app software, because you can take any old, operating system and install an application on it, or you can actually install server software on it. Like, for example, taking a Windows XP, Windows 10, or Windows 11 and activating the IIS or installing Apache on it. Once you do that, guess what? It is a web server. If you go ahead and you install the app or the operating system, you monitor the operation of the computer system or of the app, and then you make any config changes to the system as needed. So, for example, if you install Apache, there is a log for Apache. It keeps track of anybody that has logged in your system. It keeps track of their IP address. So you can see if your computer was made vulnerable or exploited, you can see the last few requests that were made. You can look at their IP addresses. Let's take a look at system monitoring. When it comes to system monitoring, step one, define security goals, describe behavior as a baseline. You can have sample performance information and compare it with the baseline, and report any anomalies. Finally, we have the ability to identify vulnerabilities. So we already went over some vulnerabilities, like, for example, social engineering, DNS spoofing, and hijacking. So a lot of servers are vulnerable to some of the same things. So you can use some of the research tools that you were provided. There are websites that you can go to check out all possibilities, to check out the surface area vulnerabilities that this object may have.